two questions.
I have two questions. One for Dr. Gillian Koh and one for the Mufti. All right, my first question is directed to Dr. Gillian Koh. Just now from the the triangles, we have seen that the youths of Singapore who participated in that event were putting more emphasis on moral values and helping the elderly on the quality of life. So my question is, in the next 10 or 50 years, do you think Singapore, the government of Singapore, the way it's being governed, will put more emphasis on quality of life? And if whether this will happen or not, do we move on with the structure that we have, or do we remodel on countries like, regions like Scandinavia? That's my first question. My second question is for Dr. Fatris Bakaram, the Mufti of Singapore. Sorry, bersama. You mentioned that the aspirations of the youth, like we are having a much more younger religious community. So, and as such, the aspirations of the youth will definitely contradict with the traditions of the elderly, of what we have. And and as you can see, the next 50 years, the youth are becoming more secular, more inclusive, more liberal, because of this, of where we are living, Singapore. So, what is the future of religion in Singapore? Do we reform or do we revive, especially in terms of minorities such as the LGBT groups? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. I think that Singapore will be what we make it. I think that's the starting point. We always imagine that Singapore is what PAP will make it, or Lee Kuan Yew will make it, or Goh Chok Tong will make it, or Lee Hsien Loong will make it. But in truth, I think if we look at things, we will find that they have also had to respond to what people are saying, and that Singapore is governed not just by the ballot box during the general elections, but there are always many, many, many occasions where the leaders, community leaders as well as political leaders, are constantly trying to meet the ground, have discussions, public consultation exercises, right? This time around we had our Singapore conversation. And of course you have REACH, People's Association, so on and so forth. The fact is that over the past 2 years, as I mentioned, we have seen the government not just say that it wants to change the social compact between people and state, right? State can be run by WP and SP, it doesn't matter, whatever is the government that is of the day. But really, how do we, as individuals, then interact with the macro level state? So the PAP government has said that it wanted to change the social compact between people and the state. What does this translate to? It has translated to, in the indirect fashion, far more subsidies to ensure that the people who are from the disadvantaged groups right up to 30th percentile get more help than they've ever had. This is in the area of more subsidies for housing, more subsidies for healthcare, so that the MediShield, MediSave can cover more ailments, more medicines, more help for childcare. Now you see that, in fact, if you're a business person running a childcare, you'll be, hiya, how can government dictate what kind of fees I can charge? Is this communist China? But in fact, what the government has done is to say, if you want to be an anchor operator of a childcare, or now a partnership operator, I will actually give you the real estate at a subsidized price. I will make the cost of your business of running a childcare cheaper, as long as you put a cap on the fees you charge. So that is highly interventionist if you were a pure capitalist model. But you've seen the government do more subsidies. That is indirect. But we've also seen more direct help. That means actually money in your pocket for the poor and the disadvantaged, up to 30% income, up to 60 even. How? You see that the government's sort of given more money now through workfare. If you work as a low-wage worker, the government tops up, right, your income through cash and CPF, up to the equivalent of 3 months' worth of your wages. right? Okay, that's fine. If you don't care workfare, never mind. Now you actually have improved interest rates on CPF, which means your retirement funds will grow. But never mind, this year's budget, the big bang measure, is something called silver support. So as you know, there will be the elderly who at the time when they worked, if they worked, $300 a month was a big deal. In fact, $200 a month in the 1970s to the 80s was a lot. But translated to today's price level, it's nothing. So the government has actually taken bitten the bullet and actually said, we actually will give transfer payment. It's literally money in your hand so that you can cope. Yes, some people will say $350 up to $700 per quarter is not a lot. But it's a step in the right direction, and it required almost a change of religion for PAP, which has been pragmatic because afraid of people taking advantage, that has been market-based, you know, that says you have to work. How can you get money for free? That's completely changed now. Finally, the GST vouchers. This has been in place for a long time, but it is directed at the poor and disadvantaged, probably up to the 30th percentile, where they can get, again, really money off the bat, cash, money vouchers to cover their utilities, right? And CPF top-ups, yeah. So you can see that it is never black or white, but it is a movement towards certainly talking about what is the quality of life we want all Singaporeans to enjoy, and further help for the people at the bottom to level them up. The next step, if you wanted to be Scandinavia, is to say, sorry, we scrap everything, and we say everybody must have free childcare, free education, free everything, and then you know, you stuck on that basis. That's fine, as long as then you get good financial accountants who can tell you, how can you sustain it? You can sustain it for first 5 years. Sustain it for 7 years. Then you have to raise the taxes, or you have to really, you go broke. I mean, it's just a fact of life, that's all. Yeah. Unless you can wait 10 years where everybody is now a Steve Jobs, you know? Create an Apple of your own, create Instagram, Twitter, and we have such a lot of economic success that it becomes a virtuous cycle. Then you have plenty to distribute. Well, you have to take a chance. And a lot of politicians, by the time they reach 7 years and the kitty is broke, they'll say, I don't need to run for elections, let the next group take over. Then they'll be, how am I going to find the money in there? So I think all of us will have to think long term, like you are doing the next 50 years, and consider what is sustainable over the long term. Okay, Mufti, your turn.
No problem. I don't think that there will be definitely 100% contradiction between the aspiration, the idealism of the youth as compared to the tradition held by the older generation. But there can be areas of conflicts. And that is caused by the shift that has happened. The religiosity of the older generation are very much anchored on individual figures and characters, you know. In kampungs, for example, you live in this kampung, you have this mosque, you have this scholar, you have this kiai or this imam, and that's where your religious life is being shaped by his views, his advices and instructions. But I think the younger generation now is developing our religiosity, our understanding of our faith based on ideas, you know, no longer based on individual character, individual figures. So that's why you can see, for example, this problem that we are facing with IS, right? I don't think that those youth are being disillusioned. They took the trouble to go to Syria or Iraq because there is an individual that they want to follow. That's never been the case. But the idea, the frustration, the platform and the channels that they perceive as providing them with a chance and opportunity to right the wrongs of the world, right? So because of that, because the shift from building or living your religious life based on a figure, on an individual, to ideas, that may cause contradiction between the younger generation and older generation in understanding religion itself. But I'm not very sure whether it's right for us to assume, as you mentioned, that the younger generation having different aspirations, they are moving towards becoming more liberal, more progressive in that sense. Because at the same time, you can see even groups of younger Muslims who have, what do I say, the opposite of liberalism in their thought, religious thought. You know, you can see pockets of younger Muslims who are having narrower understanding of religion, who are being stricter in preserving their identity. When suddenly they say that, you know, we are facing challenges that may have a harmful effect on our faith, you know, they want to protect it, they want to preserve it, they want to jealously guard it. You can see Muslims, younger Muslims, not only Singapore, but in other parts of the world also, who resort to a strict understanding of the religion, who say that, you know, we have to isolate ourselves in order to save our faith. We have to live in our own exclusive communities. We cannot mix with other faith and other religions. And this is happening, although I say that it is in minority, and we have to address that. And we have to help this younger generation to not continue with that very narrow idea of what preserving religion is all about. The other thing is that it's very difficult for us and difficult for me to foresee and forecast what would be the religious life 50 years down the road. What would be our religious identity 50 years down the road, especially for Muslim community. Why? For one big reason, and that is of the concept of ummah. We have this trans-border single nation of Muslims that we identify as ummah. And because of that, whatever ideas, whatever lifestyle, whatever approach to religion that is being practiced and taken by a particular Muslim community in any part of the world will have an impact on other communities also. In Singapore, for example, you have certain groups who will say that we must apply strict hudud laws because Brunei has embarked to apply it. There are other groups who say that we must be more liberal in our practice of Islam. We must discard many aspects of our tradition that we inherit, for example, because there are other groups, other Muslim communities in other parts of the world who are moving towards that. You know, you have so-called rightly or wrongfully labeled by many other Muslims that there are certain groups of intellectuals in Indonesia, for example, who are promoting liberal Islam. So there have been calls on our shores for us to emulate and copy that in Singapore. So because of this trans-border single nation of Muslims called the Ummah, it's very difficult for you to really shape exclusively that Islam in Singapore should be this version of Islam, that Muslims in Singapore will have their own exclusive identity in Singapore. All right? Now, I'm not saying that I'm pessimistic. I'm not saying that we will just have to expose ourselves being influenced and dictated or affected by the religious trends of Muslims from other parts of the world. We have to establish our own understanding, our own progressive Islam, our own Islam that is based on principles that push us forward, not principles that limit and restrict our progress, right? And that is the challenge. How can you identify, construct, develop your own identity as a religious Muslim community in Singapore? At the same time, you understand that there are other developments in the world that may affect you. And you cannot isolate yourself, right? So it's very difficult for me to make that forecast. But, you know, you have to decide together and discuss and chart our way forward together as a nation. Thank you. there any other questions besides Ahmad? Anyone else? Okay, another question. Two more questions. Any other burning question? These are two very busy people. You'll never see them ever again, except on television. So don't say that. Oh, you know, maybe in the malls. Okay, so Ahmad and then yourself.
Thank you again, Dr. Koh and Mufti, for the wonderful insight that you have provided to us. I have two questions, if I may. The first is that looking at the participants for the IPS survey, PRISM, they are of a certain profile and they are of a certain tier as well. So if we, my concern is that they have this noble intention of helping the poor and whatnot. But if, let's say, they are designing policies for them, how do we ensure that the policies that we design are effective for the lower income group, for example? Because we may have not been able to mix with them and understand them even or experience what they have gone through. So that's my first question. The second question is for Mufti, and I hope that I do not misunderstand your later part of the sentence. Because from the way I see it, the idea of this singular ummah seems to be a bit problematic. So to what extent then is this idea of the ummah problematic? The other thing is that I'm a bit concerned that we are seeing groups of Muslims or group of religious communities or whatsoever as a singular monolithic blob, because we can be liberal on certain issues and yet conservative on certain issues. I think that I should raise this fact for a bit. So Dr. Koh and Mufti, please. Thank you.
And the other question?
So, hello, hi. It's for the Mufti. Question is, do you think it's possible to have the teachings and values of Islam to be shared on a secular level? Reasons why I'm asking this is because even in the community Muslim itself, there are separation between those who are really religious and also those who are more secular side. And I don't know, because I tend to notice that they tend to have this, like, oh, this is only for you guys and this is not for me. Well, do you think that that can be changed, or is there any ways that you think that can be done to change that?
Thank you, Ahmad, for your question. Yeah, so the focus of his question was if the survey only got views of younger, somewhat better off middle class background type of people, what do we do if the policies are just based on their views? Well, I take comfort from the fact that though these people are from sort of a higher level in terms of socio-economic class, their views are highly egalitarian. Their views are highly focused on moral values, not just economic growth. Their views are not, give the most to the best, you know. They're like, can we distribute more? Can we have the government to do better? Can we have the government to focus more on the needy and the elderly, you know, and so on and so forth. So while these seem to be youths or younger people of a certain level, their considerations for the rest of society are very strong. So it is quite heartening, really. But on an ongoing basis, and as I have described to you in terms of the latest changes over the last 2 or 3 years, we see that the government is actually full of consideration for the disadvantaged and the needy in Singapore. The focus is on leveling up in terms of education, in terms of social welfare. The focus very much on the children of the disadvantaged families to ensure that they have every help that they need. Again, bursaries, EduSave Fund, so on and so forth, to ensure that they have all the opportunities possible. Even if their parents feel they are unable, as long as someone, some community leader, some Mendaki leader, CDAC leader can find them, they can be helped. I also remember Dr. Maliki, who reached out to people who lived on beaches. Some of them made bad calls on housing, maybe had some debts to pay, turned in their flats and had no place to live. He described the process of looking for blocks of flats that were supposed to be redeveloped, and he assigned them into rental flats so that these people who lived on beaches, remember, the usual narrative is, personal responsibility. You made a bad decision, you live with it. But no, we don't stop there. We have a lot of people in society who say, no, we should help them nonetheless, give them a second chance, third chance, fourth chance. So rental housing. But he also then took the next step to ensure that the children in these settings, they are not beautiful, they are not wonderful settings, because the idea is not to let people feel too comfortable also, right? And also remember, I mentioned the subsidies so that eventually you can, after the 2-year waiting period for a new flat, you can still afford. He went out and he looked for the children and tried to ensure that they will get after-school care for their studies. So he looked for the students in the neighboring schools and adults and tried to ensure that they have a safe space to go to at night where they can spend 2 hours studying and that they will get help as well. So I think, he couldn't have done it just by himself or because he is the Minister of State. But in fact, that tuition setting is run by young people, by community leaders, by some teachers, volunteers basically. So we have that. I think the ethos of not just self-help but collective responsibility is very strong in Singapore. And the key thing that we need to do is surface this, translate it into policies, and ensure that voluntarism is enabled. Yeah. So I hope that sort of helps you to know that while the people who come to our survey, our IPS Prism, was a certain segment, they're not thinking for themselves. It's possible, of course, that there are many more Singaporeans out there who don't have the same ethos. Our Singapore Conversation survey had one question, which was, if we needed to strengthen social safety nets and help the disadvantaged, will you pay more taxes? Okay? And again, that was a representative sample. So what you saw in the results was, the higher socio-economic class you go, the support for paying more taxes, if it goes to the needy, goes up. Except when you go to the highest level, top income level, it comes down a bit. Okay? So one indicator is that we do have a strong sense of collective responsibility, which we should celebrate and continue to build up. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you that the concept of omagh is problematic to a certain degree. Because the reality of life now, the reality of life of communities within their respective countries, with political boundaries, with differences and variation in cultures and so forth, makes the notion of omagh, if not understood properly, will cause a lot of difficulties and problems. But because it is a notion that is there in Islam, I don't think in the next 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, you can just eliminate that. It's not possible. I don't see that it's possible that Muslim will come to a stage where they say, no, there's no ummah at all. We don't need to hold on to that notion. But I think, how do we address that? How do we utilize the concept of ummah to be useful rather than be disruptive? Looking at Muslim communities in other parts of the world with different customs, with different cultures, with different challenges, how do that add to the wealth of experience of different communities, rather than looking that as the factor that determine from foreign communities on what you need to do, on how you chart your future and your journey forward here in Singapore, right? And that is one of the factors that can cause difficulties. And when you say about Muslims in Singapore even, although it is very small and we are only about 500,000 in number, we cannot say that we are monolithic in that sense. We have differences among us. And that is something that you cannot, I think it will be very unproductive, futile even, if you try to put an effort to make everybody to be one in terms of ideas, understanding of the religion, the practices, their outlook, and so forth. But it's about how do you respect, embrace, and harness that diversity. It's about identifying the challenges that we need to address together without being separated or dipisahkan, ya, dijauhkan antara kita, between us, just because we have different understanding of certain aspects of the religion. Right? Now, I'm very encouraged when I see that the younger generation, the youth, the Muslims in Singapore, for example, when you understand and you identify that as something that you want to do, you do it without resorting to the need of, no, I must affiliate myself with this organization, be a member, wait for the committee or the council to decide on certain programs and I ride on it. No, this initiative itself, Hairul Rijal and your friends, for example, is motivated by that sense of responsibility, the need, the drive to do something, you know. You don't wait from other people. And you can have thousands of different groups of different interests. But I think if religion can be that motivation, it will be fantastic for this community to move forward based on religion in that sense. Not based on, no, you must be dictated, defined by a singular understanding, monolithic approach of a certain school of thought in Islam. Because that cannot be achieved. That will not help you to move forward. That will only cause the community to be regressive rather than progressive. So I think this is a very pragmatic approach of the younger Muslims, you know. But the challenge, and I think the thing that we need to do is to ensure that you should not allow that desire to still discuss on classical differences, theological differences among the younger Muslims when we talk about religion. There are signs that some youth are going into that, but that should be stopped. Based on the wisdom of the older generation, the drive that you have to contribute, to do positive things, that must be the religious identity of the community, regardless of the different understanding of certain parts of the faith. And I don't see there's any problem of presenting religion, to promote religion to its own religious members of community, even though we are living in this reality of a secular state and secular nation. You know, people who take religion as a force or a cause of isolation actually are people who do not understand what religion is all about. You know, it is wrong to use religion as the justification to say that, no, this is for you because you are religious and this is not for me because I don't, or I've yet to be religious, right? Because at the end of the day, religion is not about only belief. There are many aspects of religion, and those individual aspects must be nurtured, and it can be done. There are the aspect of belief and theology of religion, belief about God, about that supreme being. There is also the ritual aspect of religion, but there is also the social aspect of religion. There is the human elements of religion, which for many, many, many generations, when it comes to Islam and Muslims, we tend to ignore that. For us, Islam is about God. For us, Islam is about rituals. For us, Islam is about to save ourselves from hellfire. But Islam is also about social development. And that has been shown by the Prophet himself. 15 centuries ago. And that has been the aspect of Islam that has been ignored for many years. You know, who you are, whether you are a pious Muslim or you are half Muslim, if I can use that term, or even if you are not a Muslim. You know, in Quran there is a chapter called Surah An-Nisa, chapter women. In that chapter, it talks about the relationship in a family, the rights of a woman, the responsibility of a husband, relationship between family members, even relationship between the different communities in a society. It talks about international relations. It's talking about how do you deal with even your enemies, right? But before the chapter goes into those aspects of interhuman relations, it starts with the first verse reminding us that we are all one family. Ayuhan nas ittaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahidah. As a religious person, we realize and we believe that we all come from the same father. And that is in Islam and also true in Christianity, right? And even in any other religion, I don't find a religion who says that, I have my God who created me and there's another God who created you. In any religion, the faith is that there is one supreme being and we are all created by him. Whether you believe or not believe, that's your right to choose, right? So I think as religious persons, we have that aspect of respecting others as human beings because we are from the same family. Then from then, you talk about laws, about regulations, about the rules that govern interhuman relationship, inter-communities relationship, international relationship. But that must be based on the reality that we are one as human beings. And because of that, if you understand, the enlightening understanding of Islam is that whether you choose now to be pious, to be rigorous, rigid, or you choose to be liberal, you choose to be Muslim later, right? That should not be a cause or factor that each group isolate themselves from the other. So there's no problem actually, to present Islam, present religion, to be religious in such a society. Thank you very much.